The Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio, a car that I've been dying to drive, and it's a shame because at the time of filming this in 2024, the car is being discontinued. At the time, just under 10 years ago, this was Italy's answer to BMW M and Mercedes AMG. As a 2.9-liter V6 sharing the same engine architecture of a Ferrari California, just with 2 less cylinders. It makes 505 horsepower, 443 foot-pounds of torque, has an electronically controlled limited slip differential, and big brakes. It did a Nurburgring time of 7:32. Did Alfa really pass on all its racing heritage into this car? Because on paper, it looks spectacular. This is driver's Paddock. Let's take the Alfa out on track, and at the end, I'll give you my full review.
Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. The brakes are good, okay. I get about 3 to 5 laps in this thing before the track day is over. Let's see what this car is all about. All right, here we go. Let's warm the tires a little bit. Like I said, I only get 3 laps in this car. All right. Here we go. Transmission is really responsive. Brakes are good. Throw the car in. Steering is really light. A little bit bouncy. Here we go, guys. Let's try to learn this car as fast as possible. Oh, transmission is good. Steering is way too light for my liking. Oh, pushes. I like how the shifters are on the steering wheel. I like it. The brakes are really good. What brakes are these? It can slide all right. Let's try to find a good lap. It's not as eager to rotate as my car for sure. All right, come on, buddy. All right, let's see what full throttle is like on the back straight here. All right, here we go. Has good power. It's not super torquey like a BMW. It feels way more linear. Yeah, the speed differential is just too big. Sorry, guys. I wish I could put down a fast lap in this car. It feels like it could be very fast. Okay, what's going on here? All right, come on, guys. All right, here we go. Let's see if the FD will let me pass. All right, okay, here we go. Okay, it can power oversteer for sure. It's very controllable. It's not as snappy as a BMW. But it does have a front end push for sure. It's hard to get this car rotated on entry. All right, let's get past this radical. Lift to rotate, come on. not as eager to rotate on entry. Brakes are so confidence inspiring. Oh yeah, okay. Okay, what's happening here? What is happening here? Guys, this car is the real deal. It feels light, it feels nimble. It does understeer on entry, but that's pretty expected of a FR car. I wish it rotated a little bit more on the brakes. Like if I trail brake it a little bit deeper, I want that rear end to come around. It has power oversteer for sure. No problem, right? You can slide it anywhere. The transmission's amazing. The steering is a little bit light and it's very numb, but I could live with it. I could live with it. I don't have a lap timer in the car, I just realized, so maybe I'll dump something in there. Really interested to see what this car can do. Let's do one more lap. One thing I will say as well is the car is doing something. I feel like traction control isn't fully off. I feel like it's doing something. Here, I wish I could lift the rotate a little bit better. It does do it, as you can see there. I wish it was just a little bit sharper. There's a little bit delay to the rear end coming around. Let's see what happens if we really throw it in. Not bad. It'll definitely slide, guys. It'll definitely slide. I still do feel there's a little bit of traction control kicking in. I don't know what it is. Something's grabbing the brakes or something. I don't know. We're in this sort of race mode, but good experience. Would I buy this over an M3? I don't know. Let me think about it. Let me think about it.
So everybody, the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio, and this particular example is actually a 2017 model. Let me start off by saying I am a huge BMW M fan. If you watch the channel, you know I have a M2 competition time attack build, both G87 and F87. But let me tell you, I am a big fan of the Giulia as well. The engine actually makes 505 horsepower, has 443 foot-pounds of torque. It has 0 to 100 in 3.8 seconds. And on the drag strip that day, it did a quarter mile in 12.2 without any prep. We just lined it up and went. And the power band, let's start there. It is way more linear than BMW M cars. And BMW M cars have a lot of torque, right? They have a way of sort of kicking the car sideways. You see so many BMWs drifting around, sliding around, but this car can do that as well. It does have the torque to break the rear loose at any moment, but in terms of a turbocharged engine and the top end, this is the best that I've ever driven. It really rewards you actually for revving it out. In the M cars, they sort of die out in the last 800, 1,000 RPMs. You can sort of short shift it a little bit, but this car, you want to really rev all the way out to the top. It's really rewarding. And for reference, like my BMW M2 competition that's tuned with a downpipe, has a full exhaust, DCT trans, 400 pounds taken out of it, it hits 201 kilometers an hour GPS speed. This car hit 203 on the speedometer. I know there's a variance between speedometer and GPS speed, but it gives you an idea of how fast this stock car is. And I find that this power band is way better for the track, right? It doesn't have that crazy low end torque that the BMW has, but it's again more exciting at the top end. This car, even if it starts to understeer, right, again, it can break the rear wheels loose at any time. So if you give it a lot of throttle, it'll just rotate the car, right? And that leads me to the 8-speed ZF. It's really good, right? But it's changing gears all the time. You have to constantly change gears. But it is quick, it's effective, but I do prefer the DCT in the BMW M cars in the F Series and the E Series when this car came out. I think that transmission is more involving, I think it's more visceral, I think it's more direct, but I will say that on the street, that trans is really, really jerky. Like in first gear startups, it can be very, very jerky. The 8-speed ZF is butter smooth, right? And that, the dynamic mode, the N mode, the A mode, it really transforms the transmission, transforms the throttle response, the steering, the dampers, everything. That car really comes alive in its most aggressive setting. I loved it, but I just felt like it was shifting gears a little bit too quickly. I mean, that can be involving in and of itself, but I do prefer how exciting the BMW DCT is. Next, the steering ratio. It is very, very, very fast, which normally I would like, right? I want that sharpness, that directness, but the steering is also really, really light. And so, with a steering rack that fast, at the very least, it needs to be slightly heavier, but also there's no real feel through the steering, unfortunately. On center, there's, again, not very much feel at all. You can very effectively put the car where you want to put it. It's precise, but unfortunately it lacks feel and is, again, too light. So again, if you're gonna put that fast of a rack in a car, I just wish that it had more feel through it. When you load up the car, you do sort of know what's going on the front end, more so from the yaw, right? More so from your hearing, not so much from the steering itself. Basically, there's not a lot of feel. And that is the same story for the brakes. The brakes are actually brake-by-wire. Although they were really, really, really good, they were really, really confidence inspiring, I don't actually know if that's the electronics giving me a false sense of the braking performance, reducing the perception, if you will, of the brake fade and sort of damping a little bit of the loss and gain of grip when you're trying to threshold brake. They were very confidence inspiring. They were very good. They were very effective, but the braking experience felt a little bit numb, similar to the steering experience. Both, again, extremely effective, really good in terms of performance, but I felt like there was a computer between me and the braking, computers between me and the steering, which honestly, that is the fact. It felt a little bit muted. Next, the electronically controlled limited slip differential. It's not as sophisticated as ones in the F Series or G Series BMW M cars or something like the Camaro SS1LE. Those you can feel really pushing more and more, locking the diff more and more, pushing you out of the corner, really taking in yaw sensors, steering input, wheel speed sensors, throttle position to vary the lock, to really, again, push the car out of the corner. I felt like all those cars that I mentioned and the Giulia, right, the benefit of that electronically controlled limited slip differential is that on entry, it can be very open. So that reduces understeer, right? The car is very free to turn, right? And as you get on the power in the M cars and in the SS1LE, the rear end just locks more and more and more and more, pushing you out of the corner. I felt like this car, as you get on the throttle, it sort of locks, it does its job, it does push the car out of the corner, but it doesn't increase the lock and push you out more and more, and it doesn't throttle steer as well as the cars I mentioned, but it's still really good, still really effective. Now, this car also has 50-50 weight distribution, right? It has carbon fiber seats, it has a carbon fiber drive shaft, it has a carbon fiber hood, it uses aluminum in many, many places, but it still weighs 3,800 pounds. It hides its weight very, very well, but I always say weight is weight, right? More heat generated on track, right? More consumables that you burn through, brake pads, tires, that sort of thing. More quickly, rotors, right? And with a car that shares parts with Ferraris, God help you if you need to replace those very expensive carbon ceramic brakes, but it's just something to consider when you're looking to take a car to the track. If you look at the 7-minute 32, very impressive, by the way, Nurburgring Lap, first of all, you'll find that the driver is literally wearing a t-shirt, jeans, and wearing a nice watch. And the first time I watched that, I knew I had to drive this car because it meant that, you know, Alfa didn't take itself too seriously. And literally, the racing driver is sliding the car everywhere he's going, right? And you know, you see the BMW, Porsche drivers, super serious, gloves, full suit, helmet, everything, right? But very impressive 7-minute 32 Nurburgring Lap. You know, this car is really good, and Alfa, of course, has so much racing heritage. But it's unfortunate that they struggled in the North American market, because if they sold more cars, if there was more dealerships, if they were more reliable, if parts were more accessible, then maybe they could have continued to improve on this platform, and we would see more and more and more and more of them. But anyone I know that has driven an Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio has loved it for one reason or another. And I'm glad I got to experience it before its official departure from North America. And at the time of filming, you can still buy one. But the question is, would I buy one? And the answer is maybe as an all-around daily, sometimes track car, but as a very dedicated track car, I don't think so. I mean, this is what the channel is all about. Like, as a track enthusiast that pushes cars hard, I think cars like the Supra, the M2 Competition, the G87, the G80s have really innovated one step further. And there's way more aftermarket parts like suspension, aero, brakes, and the ceiling is just higher. The tunability is higher. The accessibility of parts is higher. And right now, let's say, for example, if my motor fails in my M2 Competition, I can buy an old one off a Crash Stem 4 or M2 Comp for $10,000, $15,000, right? Or a transmission for about $3,000. The Alfa would be much, much more. With an engine that shares parts with a Ferrari California, it's gonna be pricey. For me, I love the Giulia for what it is, but it's still BMW M for me. The Alfa Giulia Quadrifoglio, and we hope to see this Quadrifoglio badge again, but hopefully not just in EV or hybrid format. But until then, goodbye for now. This is Driver's Paddock. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.